Hello everyone, welcome to Michigan Man MTG, and we're back today with more Marvel Spider-Man previews, and these are from San Diego Comic-Con's preview panel. But before we dive into those previews, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Marvel Spider-Man preview season and beyond. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of cards is Spectacular Spider-Man. For 1 and a white mana, you get a legendary creature, again human, spider hero, 3/2 with flash. And he has 2 abilities. For 1 mana, Spectacular Spider-Man can gain flying until end of turn. And also for 1 mana, you can sacrifice Spectacular Spider-Man, and creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So very good 2-drop in white here for Spectacular Spider-Man. 2 very relevant abilities on it. You know, that ability to flash this in and give your whole team hexproof and indestructible. So maybe if your opponent's using a board wipe, you can flash Spectacular Spider-Man into play and then sacrifice it to protect your board that's already set up. So I think this is definitely a playable card that will see play in Standard. Again, the question is what deck's going to want it, but it's definitely a very, very playable, and really push card when it comes to Spider-Man. Next, we've got Spider-Punk for 1 and a red mana. You get a legendary creature, again, that's a spider-human hero, and is a 2/1 with Riot. And this creature enters with your choice of a +1/+1 counter or haste. So depending on when you're playing Spider-Punk, a lot of times if it's, turn 2 and your opponent doesn't have anything on the board, you use it to give it haste. But otherwise, you're probably just going to give it the +1/+1 counter. Again, 2 mana, 3/2, very good in Standard. In addition to that, other spiders you control have Riot as well. Spells and abilities can't be countered, and damage can't be prevented. So very powerful 2-drop. It does a lot of very powerful things. Basically it turns off your opponent's ability to counter anything, and that's including activated abilities. And damage not being able to be prevented is very relevant in Standard right now, because we do have some things that in essence turn off damage currently in Standard, and this is going to be a way around those barriers to playing some of the better 1 and 2 drops that we see in Standard, even some of the 3 drops. So I think Spider-Punk definitely has a home in a mono red deck, or a red deck in really kind of any kind of red deck that we're probably going to see for Spider-Man Standard season and beyond. So this one definitely going to see play. Next, we've got some mythic rares I want to talk about, and the first is Anti-Venom, Horrifying Healer for 5 white mana. It's a 5/5 legendary creature that's a symbiote hero. When Anti-Venom enters, if he was cast, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If damage would be dealt to Anti-Venom, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on him. So Anti-Venom, 5 mana, all in white. Now we have had Phyrexian Obliterator and cards like that in Standard before, but they don't really see a tremendous amount of play. So my guess is Anti-Venom won't see much play. And the reason is simple. It's 5 white mana. So you have to be in a mono white strategy, most likely to even be able to cast this. So that's why I don't think this is going to see much Standard play. Next, we've got another mythic, and that's Gwen Stacy. Legendary creature, human performer hero, a 2/1. When Gwen Stacy enters, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card for as long as you control this creature. And for 2, a blue, a red, and a white mana, you can transform Gwen Stacy, activate only as a sorcery. So nice coming into the battlefield ability there of exile the top card, and as long as Gwen's in play, you can again play that card that's exiled. So that's very powerful. Now on the back of the card, and this is where we need to talk about the card, because I don't think the front side is necessarily 100% Standard playable, but I think in a Jeskai deck, the combination of being able to cast either side of the card, and this is one of the things that I didn't talk about in my previous video, the way these cards work that are 2-sided with mana cost on both sides is you can cast either side. So you could cast Gwen Stacy early in the game, or you could, cast Ghost Spider in the mid to late game for 5 mana, 2, a blue, a red, and a white, just like the transform ability. And you get the legendary creature, Spider Human Hero, 4/4, Flying, Vigilance, and Haste. So you get the advantage of haste. And whenever you play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, you put a +1/+1 counter on Ghost Spider. If you remove 2 counters from Ghost Spider, exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. So kind of the similar abilities. Now, on the surface, I don't think either of them is probably particularly playable in Standard, but I think the combination of them in a Jeskai deck is playable together. And I think that's where this card is going to see play, is it's not either side is really great, but the combination of the flexibility, I think, is going to make it Standard playable in that Jeskai mid-range style deck. Next, we've got Miles Morales for 1 and a green mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human citizen hero and is a 1/2. And whenever Miles Morales enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So nice enter the battlefield trigger there, that you can make Miles a 2/3, and another creature, give that additional creature a +1/+1 counter as well. And then for 3 red, green, and white mana, you can transform Miles Morales, and you can again only activate this as a sorcery. And then you get the ultimate Spider-Man for that 6 mana, legendary creature, Spider Human Hero, 4/3 with first strike and haste. And he has camouflage for 2 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on Ultimate Spider-Man. He gains hexproof and becomes colorless until end of turn. And whenever you attack, double the number of each kind of counter on each spider and legendary creature you control. So Ultimate Spider-Man, very powerful card. Now, again, this is a card that I think probably the front side is more relevant than the back side. But again, in the late game, you might have played Miles Morales on turn 2 or 3. And then, on turn 6, you got a second copy of Miles Morales and Ultimate Spider-Man. Then you can play Ultimate Spider-Man, and they can both be in play. Because again, these are dual-sided cards that you can play either side. And I think, again, that's going to make this potentially playable in a deck in Standard, where you're looking for Miles early in the game to get those +1/+1 counters. We know we've got a number of +1/+1 counter decks currently in Standard. And in the late game, you can cast Ultimate Spider-Man and get the advantage of having the first strike haster. And that's going to be, I think, relevant in Standard. Next, we've got some more villains for the day. And the first is Dr. Octopus, Master Planner, for 5, a blue, and a black mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human scientist villain and is a 4/8. Other villains you control get +2/+2. Your max hand size is now 8. And at the beginning of your end step, if you have fewer than 8 cards in your hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So very, very powerful draw ability on Dr. Octopus here. So I think this is probably not something that's going to get cast. I think this is probably another good reanimation target. And with all the quality reanimation spells currently in Standard, I think Doc Octopus is a card, if you're kind of building it around that villain theme a little bit, it probably works. But I think where it's probably going to see its most important play is in those reanimation style decks, where you're going to reanimate Dr. Octopus, and you probably are down to a couple cards in your hand at the end step. Now you have 8. So very, very powerful card draw engine here, and potentially a very busted card in Standard. Certainly, this is a card that is very, very good in Commander. Next, we've got our land for the day, and that's Multiversal Passage. Okay, and as this land enters the battlefield, you get to choose a basic land type. Then you may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters tap. This land is the chosen type. So really flexible card here. What we've got from the current Edge of Eternity set are 5 of the 10 shock lands. In Multiversal Passage, the way I'm looking at this card is it's a limited shock land. So if you don't have anything to cast on the turn that you're going to put it in play, you just leave it tapped. But if you've got stuff to play and you need that mana, well, you pay the 2 life, choose the color that you need, and then go on from there. So I think this is very playable, and I think it's going to see quite a bit of play in Standard. Next, we've got Kraven's Last Hunt for 4 mana. It's a saga. On Chapter 1, you get to mill 5 cards. Then when you do, this saga deals damage equal to the greatest power among creature cards in your graveyard to target creature. So it doesn't have to be something that you milled. At that point, it'd just be whatever the biggest thing is to target creature. So the downside of that is you don't know what you're going to get. So it could be a 2-drop or a 7-drop. Who knows? So I think that ability has some relevance, but it's less powerful than we've seen with some other abilities from the set so far. And then on Chapter 2, target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And then on Chapter 4, you get to return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So I think it's a card that has limited playability in Standard. Really, we're not looking for those things, kind of what this is doing right now in Standard. Maybe in the future we will be. But right now, I don't see Kraven's Last Hunt as something that's probably going to see a lot of Standard play. Next, we've got Iron Spider Stark Upgrade for 3 mana. Legendary artifact creature that's a spider hero and is a 2/3 with vigilance. And you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact creature and or vehicle you control. And for 2 mana, you can remove 2 +1/+1 counters from among artifacts you control to draw a card. So I think relevant abilities on this, the fact that it gives all your artifact creatures a +1/+1 counter, I think is a relevant ability in Standard. We've got a lot of artifact creatures that are seeing currently play in Standard, and Iron Spider may be just a way to help boost those things and potentially give you also some card draw in a kind of +1/+1 counter deck. So I think this has got some chance to see play as well. And all of these Spider-Man cards that we're seeing on the front side of them, they're all 2 and 3 mana. So that makes them playable in Standard. Now, this one's I feel like is a little bit less playable. But you can tap it and immediately, give it that +1/+1 counter. And because of that, probably has some playability in Standard. Like most of the Spider-Mans, I think, are going to have some play in Standard. And next, we've got the Green Goblin Revenant. For 5 mana in Rakdos colors, you get a legendary creature. It's a goblin human villain, 3/3 with flying and death touch. And whenever Green Goblin attacks, discard a card, then draw a card for each card you've discarded this turn. So if this was in a discard deck, where you're discarding things naturally over the course of a turn, you play this, it attacks, and then you get the additional benefit of drawing at least an additional card for each of those. So the low end of the curve here is you get to discard a card and draw a card, or if you've been drawing and discarding throughout the game, it's going to be, hey, I've discarded 3 or 4 cards, and now my discard gets me 3 or 4 cards. So I think Green Goblin has some outside ability to see Standard play, but again, right now, the kinds of decks that we're seeing that are playing the draw discard, those decks aren't in black. So unless we see more of a shift towards black, I don't think Green Goblin will see much, if any, play. Next, we've got Web Warriors for 5 mana. Got hybrid green or white. It's a spider hero. It's a 4/3. And when this enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. So I think in Limited, this is going to be a very solid card, because you're going to buff your whole team when it comes into play. So you play this on turn 5, you've got 3 or 4 creatures already in play, now you're going to buff everything. So in Limited, I think it's good. Probably doesn't see Standard play because it's 5 mana. Alright, those were the preview cards we saw at Comic-Con San Diego. Tell me what you think in the comments. I think, overall the set is looking to, be an interesting one. Definitely there's some power creep and push in the set. And one of the things I also want to comment on is this is going to be a small set. Okay, we're going to have less than 200 cards in Marvel Spider-Man. If you've been paying attention to the lands, you know that they're in the 190s for the land cards. So that tells me we're going to see less than 200 cards. And what we've been seeing over the last several years is each set's around 280 cards. So we're going to see about 80 less cards than we have been seeing. And I think that's going to have an interesting impact, certainly in limited when it comes to, pre-release and limited overall, because the card pool is just going to be much more limited than we're used to. All right, so those are the Comic-Con previews. Thanks for staying to the end of the video, and I will see you in the next one.